Hey, everybody. We're so glad to see you. And as always, David and I are so grateful for our colleague Jennifer, who knows all the ins and outs of this techie stuff. Yeah, we're getting crazy after this summer. We're going to reactions, so we'll see how that goes tonight. Next slide, please, Jen. So on August 25th, 25 years ago, our founders signed on the dotted line to create what was then Casa de la Luz Foundation and is now Roots and Roots. So we're going to be doing some celebrating this year and looking forward to the next 25 years. But we're just so grateful for, so many of you who have been on this journey with us for years now and welcome folks who are new to us. And I'll talk a little bit about on the next slide the work we do. So we do a few different things. One is to provide financial support to low-income hospice patients and their families because there are so many needs that aren't covered by health insurance and people have to stop working to caregive. So that's kind of what we do behind the scenes. And then what we're doing tonight, we're educating about end-of-life issues, including grief. And tonight, I'm really excited that Melissa has joined us to talk about help texts. And you'll learn a bit more about her when David takes over here in a moment. And then the other thing that we always just like to bring up is our online resource called the Crosswalk, which is really sort of a step-by-step guide, starting with diagnosis of serious illness all the way through end of life to everything in between. So it's a resource that we offer free of charge to the community and welcome you, encourage you to go on there for questions that might come up for yourself, your loved ones, or friends who are in need. So, and as always, we are so grateful to those of you who donate in support of this series. It makes it possible for us to keep it free and available to all. There are, besides the staff cost is a staff cost, but we have Zoom fees and those kinds of things. And you really do make it you make us able to do what we do each month. So thank you so much. And with that, I will turn it over to our colleague, David Fife, Director of Community Engagement.
Thanks so much, Julie. Howdy, everybody. It's so good to see you again. And seems like forever since we got together, but I want to begin by thanking our amazing series sponsors for this year. You can see them listed on your screen. It's Desert Diamond Casino, Right at Home, In-Home Care and Assistance, Casa de la Luz Hospice and Sunset Hospice, and the Legacy Foundation of Southeast Arizona. But tonight, we are especially grateful to Intermountain Centers. They are sponsoring tonight's education session. And Intermountain Centers is a community-based organization across Arizona that serves anyone regardless of income. Their approach is unique in that they believe in whole person health under the same roof. They provide primary care, behavioral health, addiction services, housing support, and many other things within the same continuum of care. They are an important, very important partner throughout Arizona, and Roots and Roads is grateful to collaborate with Intermountain Centers as they seek to improve the health of individuals and communities. If you'd like to learn more about their services, please visit their website that you see there on your screen. And we wanted to let you know that on October 4th at the Rialto Theater here in Tucson, Intermountain Centers is hosting the Tucson Yacht Rock Music Festival. This is a night of great music that goes to benefit at-risk youth. The truth is that music helps to create community, and community is at the heart of Intermountain's mission. So the Intermountain Centers has partnered with iHeartMedia to create an affordable concert at the historic Rialto Theater that is just going to be a night of fun. There's not going to be any long speeches. There's not going to be the silent auctions that we all try to avoid oftentimes. It's just going to be music. So tickets, the proceeds from them will go to help keep connecting low-income and at-risk families and children that they serve to behavioral health, addiction support, and critical resources for their daily living. So tickets are on sale now at rialtotheater.com, and we hope to see you all there. And now we'll turn our attention to tonight's session. Dr. Melissa Lunardini is the Chief Clinical Officer at HelpTex. Melissa will tell us more about the amazing work at HelpTex shortly. As you can see from her bio, Melissa has 20 years of experience in grief, loss, and trauma with specializations in childhood bereavement theory, grief technology, hospice and palliative care, and trauma. She has developed innovative programs and interventions across various industries, including healthcare, education, technology, and nonprofit. As the Chief Clinical Officer at HelpTex, Dr. Lunardini oversees the delivery of global mental health and grief support via text message. She ensures that all the content is rooted in evidence-based practices, manages the subscriber support team, and leads research initiatives. In fact, some of the grief experts who collaborate with HelpTex are folks who we have worked with over the years and relied on their expertise in our education efforts in the community and throughout the country. So we already have overlap that's going on, and we're so grateful for this opportunity to have Melissa with us tonight and learn more about this powerful model of grief support. So Melissa, we're going to turn things over to you now.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for joining this evening. Do we need to pause? I'm going to pull up my slides real quick and then we'll see. And I did decide I'm going to try and play a voicemail or like a voicemail and we'll see if it works. If it doesn't work, we'll just keep going. We'll give it a go. But let's see here. Okay. So again, thank you all for being here. It's my understanding that many of you come from the end of life space already. And so you know a lot about both grief and ritual. And so today my plan is to really share some stories and then also share some text examples that I'm hoping that together as a group we'll actually get to perhaps unmic ourselves here and there and just kind of openly reflect on what it feels like, what it could feel like, or maybe what we interpret this text to be, and just give an opportunity to reflect and perhaps maybe have some rich conversation along the way. But I'm curious before we get started, and you can hopefully use the emojis that we just learned about. I'm curious by emoji, and you can pick whichever one. I'm going to take as any emoji in the chat as a yes. How many of you have either sent or received a meaningful text message during a difficult time? If you've ever sent or received a meaningful text message during a difficult time. It can be a difficult time in your life or a difficult time in somebody else's. Okay, thank you for that. So I think a good place to start is why text? I feel like it's very natural and normal to be having a level of skepticism here because we have been taught our whole life that the best way to support somebody is to do that human-centered connection and work. And so, the idea that technology can come in and perhaps help supplement that can make us feel a little weird and a little uncertain about how that may transform into somebody's grief experience. And I'm here to tell you that I actually started that way myself. So as mentioned, I've been in hospice and palliative care for about 20 years, offering bereavement support. And when I first heard about text-based grief support, I thought, no way. There's no way that I'm going to provide this to the delicate and vulnerable populations that I serve on a daily basis. It's just not going to happen. And after I got off the phone with Emma, who is the CEO of this, which, by the way, she started this company after her husband died from suicide. And because what happens when a lot of people die from suicide, a lot of people don't know what to say or do, and then they say or do nothing, and it becomes even more isolating than grief already is. And so she thought, if I could text people what to do and how to show up, perhaps other people won't feel as lonely. And so that's how she presented it to me. And of course, I was running a very robust bereavement center in San Diego at the time. And I was just like, still not convinced. I'm so sorry, but there's no way that you can do the work that I do on a regular basis. Little did I know that I think the universe had a different plan in mind, because as somebody who's been providing community-based care and direct client care for a long time, I just happened to come across quite a few families in a short period of time that just had unforeseen barriers and circumstances that prevented them from accessing the service that I could provide. So there were things like a language barrier. Spanish-speaking families, well, I don't speak Spanish fluently enough to serve them in a capacity in which they deserved. We had transportation issues, families that just didn't have the means to get to our grief centers to get support. We also had just a difference in family members who wanted to attend and those who didn't want to attend. And therefore, if they had children, they had to decide on splitting childcare opportunity and dealing with job getting in the way of their ability to come and access services. We also had families who maybe they had a large group of children and couldn't come to multiple groups for the different age groups that the children needed. So there was just a lot of barriers, and it had me thinking, like, what if I put my ego aside and just for a second thought, like, what if? Could I be curious enough about text-based support helping those families? Because if they're not accessing services from me, either they're also could be struggling to access it elsewhere, or they're just not getting any at all. And so I went back and said, okay, I'm willing to try this and pilot this. And unbeknownst to me, it was incredible, and it helped us serve so many more families, particularly families that wouldn't ever be able to access our services. And so I feel you if you're coming with a skepticism, and I ask you to come in the space with a lot of curiosity and belief that there is technology that builds good in the world. When it comes to why text, so people have told us time and time again that when it comes to me and I actually don't have to leave my house, I don't have to go anywhere, it is such a weight off of my shoulders. It's an emotional burden that I don't have to contend with anymore, because I'm constantly being asked, go do this, show up here, tell your story again here. And text just comes to you and meets you where you're at. In that regard, it's very non-invasive. We talked about barriers. The interesting thing about text messaging, unlike other communication platforms, texting puts your brain into a dopamine loop, which means that the copy or the content that you're getting in the text message, not only do you feel more cared for, but then you're also more likely to be motivated to do the thing that the text is suggesting. So if the text is suggesting a coping strategy, like the one you see on the screen here about creating a ritual routine, perhaps you might be more inclined to do that just because of the mechanism and the way that the text is being communicated to you. People tell us all the time that they love that they don't have to respond. Unlike therapy, for example, where you have to be able to sit and process in the real moment, in real time, people tell us often that's what they love the most about text, is that there's no obligation. It's pretty on demand for them. They actually get to decide when they want to read it, when they want to reread it, if that is something that they want to do, and how they want to reflect on it. We also know that from our research that men and people over the age of 65 give us the highest ratings, which means that they find the most value in text-based support. So this wasn't part of the original plan here, but upon talking to Julie and David, they had mentioned that quite a few people just were curious about the service itself. And so I wanted to drop in a few slides to just talk about the service itself, and then we will talk about the type of rituals that we embed in our text messages. But I first want to talk about a real example, because I think it's important. So Wynn signed up after her son died, and her son happened to be an organ donor. And so Wynn learned about text-based support through her organ donation agency. And like organ donation agencies, we also work with hospices and community-based organizations and healthcare and hospitals and universities. We work with pretty much anybody who serves a grieving population. And we sent Wynn this text that reads, "Here's an idea you might like to try. Take a few minutes to write down something that you learned from Sean." Sean's her son. Maybe he taught you a practical skill or imparted a favorite life lesson. Put a piece of paper in your pocket so that you have this lesson with you as you go about your day. Now, Wynn went to send this to her friend, but she actually sent it to us. And then she sent it to her friend once we let her know that she sent it to us by mistake. But this is what she said to her friend. "This is from my donor society. They send me these little messages. So today I'm walking around," it gets me emotional, "with a piece of paper in my pocket that says, 'Sean taught me patience and the true meaning of love.' And in my other pocket, I have one that says, 'My mom taught me how to pull myself up from my bootstraps. LOL.'" I want to pause here and just hear from you. What do you think is happening here that really matters? Feel free to unpause or unmute yourself. I'd love to hear from anybody who has some initial thoughts on this. Beatrice, I think I see your hand up.
The person is there in the present.
They're very present in the moment with receiving that. What else is sticking out? What else is mattering here?
Christy says in the chat that she likes that it's personalized.
Yes, it's using her son's name. Yes. Is anything else sticking out?
I love the gentleness of the approach.
Yes, thank you for calling that out. It is gentle. That's what we hear time and time again is people say, it doesn't feel like I'm getting just this random text. It feels like somebody really cared and put intention behind what they were sending me. And now I want to try and play an audio clip. We'll see if it works. But this is from a gentleman who receives our text, and he signed up after his wife died. So let's see if I can get this playing.
Hello. I just want to thank y'all so much for the text messages and all that. They have really made my day. I haven't gotten one since July 6th, but I want y'all to keep them coming. I want y'all to keep them coming. It has really been a big help since Pam has passed away, and I thank y'all so much. Do not stop giving them. I thoroughly enjoy them. It makes me feel better, and it cheers me up because I'm feeling down right now. So if y'all could please help me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. You have a good day. Bye.
Now, I don't know about y'all, but if you've been supporting people for a while, you know that it is very rare to have a man keep asking you for support. And so I think that it's something, there's some merit here that texting actually works really, really well for a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily actually go into a group space or a one-on-one space. So what is it that we do? So all of our texts are rooted in evidence-based practice and theory, which means that we're taking the best research available and we're making sure that that is reflected in our content. Now, you're not going to pick out an evidence-based practice in our text because we're gently weaving it in, but it is there. You've also picked up on the fact that they're personalized. So we consider how somebody dies. A text message for how somebody, if their loved one died from suicide, will be different than if their loved one died from cancer, different than if their loved one died from dementia, different than if their loved one died from ALS or stillbirth or a child loss, because our grief is different, right? Like we don't have the same grief experience. And one of those reasons why is because the person, how they died and who they were to us makes a difference. And so we consider all of that with our text-based support. And all we're simply doing is really just sending beautifully crafted pieces of hope that also might send a little validation and normalization to your grief experience, and it might also give you a coping skill to try. And the texts come twice a week. And we also acknowledge important dates. So think about deathiversaries, anniversaries, birthdays, holidays, the days that are so hard and heavy for grieving people anyway. And we're reaching out and letting them know, like, hey, you're not alone in this. We're thinking about you. And that really matters. You know what else really matters is that we let them sign up to supporters. And so it's not enough to just get support from one place. We know that, right? When you are grieving, you are desperate for support to come from all angles. But a lot of support people, your family members, your friends, your colleagues, the people that are closest to you, they don't know what to say or do, right? But we fix that. We basically send them messages and tell them how they can show up and support their loved one who died. And we'll send them reminders like, hey, next week is Grace's dad's birthday. Here's something that you can text her to reach out and share. And so we're basically helping to build their support system up at the same time. And you'll notice that one of those texts were in Spanish. It's because we offer support in 20 different languages, and we're global, so it can go anywhere. And a lot of people ask us, they think that we're AI. Are you AI? Is anything AI used at all? And the answer is no, we don't use AI at all. We actually use experts, real live humans from all over the globe who specialize in grief and loss and trauma and mental health. And we take their best wisdom and just distill it into a bite-sized piece of information. It just gets delivered and it comes to them, so they don't have to go seeking it anywhere. And that information can be resources, it can be links to books that they might like to read, can be just as gentle as some of the texts that I'll be sharing today. So let's go with another example. And going to ask you to put your detective hat on here in a moment. And I'm also going to, spoiler alert, ask you to share again. But I'm going to read this message. And I want you to ask yourself, what are the elements that I'm noticing here and what's standing out to me here? Hi, Layla. Grief doesn't always wait for formal ceremonies or memorial times. When unexpected waves of grief arise, consider creating a small honoring ritual using what's around you. Maybe it's touching the earth, speaking messages into the wind, humming a meaningful song, or burning some sacred herbs and flowers. These gentle practices can help tend to your grief anytime it needs attention. So with your detective hat on, what are you noticing here? What's standing out for this message?
I think it's really empowering that there's so many different ways to respond to your grief and honor their loved one without needing somebody else or needing anything formal.
Yes, yes, definitely empowering. Thank you for sharing that. Is anybody else noticing anything else? Sorry, I realized that I don't have my chat open, so I actually don't get to see the chats. Let's see. Yeah, acknowledging that your grief comes in waves and it's not stuck in a particular timeline. Absolutely. Yes.
Kimberly, you had something?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, it just feels really, I think with grief, it goes, yeah, it says it in waves. And so like getting this kind of text would be so, it might be at the very right moment and at the very right time where I need to do something right here, right now. What do I do? And here I can pull this.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you for that. The other thing that I'll mention, and it's sort of a tug at one of the why ritual matters here. It kind of tugs a little bit at the last two things here, which is in this particular message, we're bringing in some Eastern and Indigenous-based practices. And those cultures have mastered ritual. We are a little behind in the Western-based cultures in terms of ritual. And we've got a lot of catching up to do. And so our job is to really expose people to a wide variety of ways that they can honor their loved one. And that includes blending Eastern, Western, and Indigenous-based practices, because you never know what you need in that moment, and you never know what's going to help you in that moment. And as we know with grief, what you try today may not be effective tomorrow. And so it's about having the tools. So this brings us to our next.
I was also thinking that for me, so often it'll be something in the environment that will trigger one of these grief waves. So maybe it's a
Yes,
smell, or it's a sound, or it's being in a place that I had forgotten about. And so actually using the elements that's around us at that moment to create the ritual can be powerful that way too.
absolutely. Yes, we tend to try and pull on the elements. We have a lot of element-based messages because it is so powerful and healing to be in nature and drawing on those elements. So let's talk a minute about disenfranchised grief. So we know that there are populations that experience disenfranchised grief, and this is that idea that your grief is not socially accepted, recognized, acknowledged, or perhaps that it doesn't contain the traditional ceremonies. Those ceremonies could be delayed, inaccessible, or absent, non-existent altogether. We see that with pregnancy loss, pet loss, caregivers. We see that with marginalized communities, LGBT, immigrant, refugee, asylum seeker communities. We see it across the board in a lot of ways. And so text can play a big role in helping with disenfranchised grief. So this is an important concept by grief researcher Ken Doka, if you're not familiar with his work. But he talks about disenfranchised grief as being this thing that a lot of people in society contend with. And he says, to enfranchise people's grief means to give them back the right and the authority to mourn their loss openly and without judgment. So the solution to disenfranchisement is not to ignore it, but to actively counteract it. So we can enfranchise grief through ritual and ceremony, validation, education, and empowerment and permission giving. And so if we read the text on the side here, it says, "Hi, Kai, even when you're grieving alone, you carry your community's love with you. Consider asking a friend, family member, or elder to bless a small stone or sacred object that you can keep close. When grief starts to feel isolating, hold that stone or object and remember that you're surrounded by care, even when your community isn't physically near. Your grief is held by many hands and hearts." So if we're looking at this through the lens of enfranchisement, the opposite of disenfranchisement, is there anything that's sticking out to you here?
I think for me, just stating that even if you don't have people present with you, you're being held in your loss.
Mm-hmm. It's that social recognition of your pain. Yes, inclusion, exactly. Thank you. Anybody else before I move forward? I fear that I don't see everybody, so if somebody has to say something, feels compelled to, please just jump out. Okay. So if you're familiar with Elizabeth Gilbert's work, she is the author of Eat, Pray, Love, and also Big Magic. And she has a new book out actually right now. And I want to share a powerful example because Elizabeth really put her grief on stage for the world to see. So she lost her partner, Rhea, to cancer, and she gave a lot of language and insight into one of her rituals that I think really resonated with a lot of people over time. So I'm going to read a little passage of hers. So Elizabeth Gilbert described her grief by saying, "When grief comes to visit me, it's like being visited by a tsunami. I'm given just enough warning to say, oh my God, this is happening right now. And then I drop to the floor on my knees and I let it rock me." She explains that the way to handle grief is to not handle it at all, but to rather bow down to its power and allow the experience to wash over you without resistance. So in essence, her ritual is suggesting that when grief hits, it's not in your best interest to try to control it or resist it, but rather to yield to its power by letting it move through you. And she goes on to explain in this quote, right? This is what rituals are for. We do this spiritual ceremony as human beings in order to create a safe resting place for our most complicated feelings of joy and trauma, so that we don't have to go on hauling these feelings around forever and keeping them weighed down. So I'm curious here, you saw that this little text here, hi Jasmine, when intense grief arrives, you can honor it with a bow down ritual. Gently drop to your knees and stay there until the intensity of your grief passes. This simple physical act of surrender can help your body process what your mind may struggle to hold. Now, I'm curious to hear from anybody in the group if you have a ritual. To me, when I read this, this is about presence. It's also about just being, and it's also about surrendering. Does anybody here, I'm wondering, have a ritual that they do that is about surrendering or just being, that they would like to share with the group? Yes, Patrice, you're muted.
My husband loves certain music. And every once in a while I'll play The Lark Ascending, which is a gorgeous piece of music. And as the lark is ascending, I'm descending. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful to hear. And I love the example of music, because that was one of the examples that I was also going to give, that we have this opportunity to embrace these really simple rituals that help us just be in our grief space. Some people have said that they do this surrendering ritual every morning when they wake up. They start their day before they even get out of bed with a prayer or talking to their loved one. And that's the space that they surrender to their grief. They know that grief has awoken them and is there present with them. And so instead of ignoring it, they just embrace it and say, this is my time to be with you, to be with my grief before I start my day. And we know that this can happen too, right? It can happen in the car, in the closet, in the shower. It can happen in a lot of different places. And it can look like lighting a candle, holding photos, reminiscing. I mean, it really truly doesn't have to be this elaborate ceremony, right? Rituals can be very simple, but meaningful. So let's talk about the different kind of disenfranchised. I know in the write-up, we mentioned a few, like pregnancy loss and pet loss and caregivers and things. So I wanted to kind of give examples and shine some lights on this. So I want to share a little story, basically, and talk about how sometimes rituals can emerge spontaneously, but sometimes we actually need to create space for it, right? It just doesn't come naturally to people. And so I have a small group of friends, and we decided a couple years back to go to Vermont for leaf peeping season, which if you've never been, it should be on your bucket list of things to do before you're not able to go. So one of our friends, though, her name was Jessica, and she had experienced her second pregnancy loss in a short period of time during her family planning journey. And so one night after dinner, we all sat around a campfire in this beautiful area, and we had some lanterns, paper lanterns that we had set aside, and we basically decided to open the floor for some like vulnerable check-ins. And so we just kind of prompted each other, like, what's been one of the hardest moments that you've had to deal with in a while? And we were able to take a lantern and write sort of our hard moment down, and then we asked ourselves, like, what would we say to somebody else who was going through that hard moment? So on one part of the lantern, we also wrote to ourselves what we would write to somebody else. And then we also then took turns writing gentle, supportive messages on each other's lanterns before we let them go. So no surprise here, but Jessica probably got the most release out of this experience. And it's because she had not done any ceremonial acknowledgements of her two babies at all. And this became a very like heartbreakingly beautiful moment where we were all able to cry together. And really, truly, she said that a weight was lifted off of her. I mean, it just kind of reminded me as somebody who's doing this for a really long time, that it's never too late to actually do ritual. There is always a time and a place for ritual to exist. And so this is not a something that we need to reflect on in the group, but one of the questions that I'm going to ask you to reflect on, and perhaps if you have a note in your bio right now, think about who in your life might need somebody to create a ceremonial space or a ritual space for their grief. Who do you know that could possibly benefit for something like this? There's a good chance that we know at least one person. Okay. So let's talk about pet loss. So when we talk about pet loss, we know that ritual is really important for people who experience pet loss, which we also know that grief is as intensely present as human loss. But often the difference with pet loss is that there aren't necessarily ceremony and rituals like there are. So pet loss then becomes a really big disenfranchised form of grief, right? And we know that people who experience pet loss, they need to be given permission to grieve and engage in ritual and continuing bonds. And the number one thing that we hear pet loss owners say is that people have told them, well, at least you can get another one. But I argue that just like with humans, you cannot ever get another them. You're never going to find a pet that had that same, personality and connection that you had with them. And in that way, they really aren't replaceable. I recently read a comment online by a grief researcher who said that the goal isn't to erase the loss, it's to integrate it, to ask, what chapter am I in now? And how do I build scaffolding that honors what came before while supporting what comes next? So I'm going to read that just because I want that to be in your mind when we're looking at this text. How do I build scaffolding that honors what came before while supporting what comes next? So in reading this message, hi, Jackie. Having a physical reminder of your dog to carry with you is called a linking object. It may help you feel more connected to karma. Some ideas for linking objects can include a bracelet or a necklace with Karma's name or photo, a small toy that he liked, or his leash or collar. Linking objects can be creative. For example, you might turn a piece of his collar into a keychain. So then a couple of weeks later, Jackie wrote back to us and said, I got a keychain made. We put some of Karma's ashes in the container, and Karma will be with us everywhere we go now, just like old times. So if we take this idea of how do I build scaffolding that honors what came before while supporting what comes next, can we see how this text exchange is able to do that, help facilitate this scaffolding for them? Know if anything else pops up or if anybody has any comments.
Yeah, Melissa, just last week I attended a partner organization, did a pet loss grief workshop, and it was really, there were probably about, I don't know, 15 or so of us, and it was really inspiring to see the ideas that people had around, I don't know if you'd necessarily call it the linking, but maybe they had even two people had this similar kind of thing where the image of the pet was in this jewelry and you hold it up to the light and you see the image. And it was just really, you know, it was an emotional night, of course, a lot of crying, but also a lot of bonding over these wonderful ideas. And like you said, I think sometimes people need permission, because as a society, we're not great at recognizing that bond, which is so, I mean, if you've, you know, read any of Dr. Joanna Cacciatore's work, it's like animal pets are the best, like far and away, the best support for people grieving, you know,
Yes.
like
Yep.
twice as much as any other category, clergy, therapists, whomever. So I think we really do a disservice to people who are grieving pet loss.
Couldn't agree more. Yep, love Joanne's work. She does great work, and yes, that is a very true stat that she just gave out. And we also send a text about jewelry too, because there is so many different unique ways to remember and honor somebody who has died, or a pet who has died. All right, so moving on to rituals and milestones, which is something that, like, I think we're all aware that these are the hardest moments for grieving people. I mean, I think a grieving person would argue, like, especially early in acute grief, like the first few weeks and months, like just every day is so hard because they're just so raw with the pain of grief. But then we also are very aware, I think supporters in general are aware these rituals and milestones come up, and those are also going to be hard and heavy grief days. Yet for whatever reason, we struggle to talk about it. Even though we have this awareness that it is a difficult day. And we know that grief is ever present when it comes to birthdays, holidays, graduations, weddings, you know, birth of a new child. And we know that during these times, grieving people feel their absence immensely. So here, we think that, you know, ritual can really help bring their essence, their spirit, their life, if you will, back into the space to be acknowledged. And you know, there's a variety of different ways. These two examples here suggest something as simple as what was already mentioned, right? Listening to somebody's favorite song, or perhaps incorporating their favorite color, displaying photos, or even writing a toast in order that honors them in some way. We've seen some really funny toasts actually get sent our way of people who have written toasts in honor of their loved ones, and obviously some very tender and sentimental ones as well. But it can be as simple as wearing jewelry, having their name or photo somewhere ironed on or sewn into attire for the day, for example. We know that rituals don't necessarily erase sadness on these days, but what they can do is transform it into something that includes both grief and love, or we might argue both absence and presence. Like, we're really recognizing that they're absent here, but we're bringing their presence into the space because it matters that much. I'm curious if anybody here has done something very unique or unusual that's out of the norm of what we just discussed as typical kind of ways to honor and bring somebody into a milestone. I'm just always curious to hear if somebody has done something unique on a holiday or a milestone. Betty? We can keep going. Okay, so caregiving. So caregiving is unique because it's, again, another often like overlooked thing. So this is like if you're caring for somebody who has a serious and chronic or terminal illness. And I'm going to share a little personal experience about how a ritual really shaped my own capacity to be present. So I was the caregiver for my maternal grandmother, Gloria, and she raised me. My mom was not in my life, and my dad lived across the country, and so she raised me as her own child, and so I viewed her as my mother. And we stayed really close all the way through, from childhood all the way through her death. and she ended up getting dementia and got really bad dementia in her 90s. And so I, being her caregiver, had to develop, I was also working full-time and often in school full-time, but I had to develop a ritual around when I would go leave work, school, and go home to take care of her. And so what I did was develop my own little routine, and I made sure that I had this ritual routine every single time, because it helped me shift my mindset from whatever I had dealt with through the day. I knew that when I started this routine on my way over there, that my mind, my body, my mental capacity and emotional capacity was able to shift gears into becoming a more compassionate, curious, and understanding sort of person that she needed me to be. And to me, it just made a huge difference. And when I tell you it was a routine from when I entered my car. There was a certain playlist that I put on. There was certain liquids that I drank. There was a certain route that I took to get there. Before I went into the house, I did a deep breathing technique. As when I walked up to the stairs and entered the room, I touched the wall. It was a very regimented routine, because all of those little things allowed my body and mind to shift so that I could go in and kind of just be present for her. And sometimes we need just these gentle reminders of taking care of ourselves, so that way we can be present for the people who are relying on us to be there. And that's a good example in this message here. Hi, Janae. Palliative and grief specialist Kara Joseph recommends that caregivers regularly take what she calls a spiritual pause. This can be through prayer, meditation, or simply taking a few deep breaths. A spiritual pause offers an opportunity to stop and be still, connect with your belief system, and remember you are acting in service. It is simple, but a powerful practice that can get you to stay centered and focused as you care for Tommy. Now, Wanda here says that she's caring for her husband who currently has dementia, and she says that there are texts that she has to refer back to and reread whenever she gets overwhelmed, because being overwhelmed is a natural, normal response to caregiving. And we know that it's going to happen. So for her to be able to have texts that anchor her in the moment and remind her that she's going to be okay, it's a really powerful text. Then becomes like a really powerful lifeline, really, in these moments. So I want to pause here. Any thoughts? We're almost done.
I just think that so much of what you're talking about is so physical. That's what keeps coming back to me is there's a grief elder, I'll call her, here in town, who talks about how we need to build our muscles and how we carry our grief. And sometimes we need to find ways of setting it down, but then it's just part of us. It's so interesting in so many of the rituals that you're talking about. It feels very physical to me, and in the examples and how that can help us build those muscles, and what our body can teach us about how we're relating to our grief.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest myth that has been the biggest disservice in our culture around understanding grief is that grief is just merely emotional. We know that grief is multidimensional, and physicality is a big part of it. There's a spiritual component, a social, a behavioral, a physical, cognitive, and emotional component to grief. And you don't get to decide how much goes where, right? And you certainly don't get to cut off one area. It's so true. So a lot of what we do has to, like, to me, I always say, like, if your support plan doesn't include tackling all of those elements of grief, you have an incomplete support plan. If your support plan is to just talk about feelings, you are not taking a holistic approach here, and possibly putting some strategies left on the table that could be really helpful for somebody to really feel normal and empowered to, walk through this journey. So thank you for sharing that. So I showed you earlier that we tech supporters, right? So again, this idea that people don't know what to say or do, so they often don't do anything. So I'm going to take you back to summer of 2013. I'm going to date myself because I was youthful then, but I was still working as a grief counselor, and I was supporting children and teens who had someone in their life die. And I was asked to help run a special camp whose siblings died or family members died in a mass shooting. And if you know your history well, you would be able to pinpoint that that was Sandy Hook. And so I was being asked to facilitate a week-long camp for them, a weekend camp actually for them. And I remember at the time thinking, oh my God, I've never done this before. I mean, I've helped regular grieving kids, but I've never helped a group of kids who've experienced a highly publicized mass shooting before. Like, what am I gonna do? And I just remember going like, you know what, you're gonna show up anyway, and you're gonna do what you know always lands, which is ritual. You know always ritual lands. And that's what we did. We made sure that every time we opened our day, it was a ritual. Anytime we opened our sharing circles, there was a ritual. When we closed our sharing circles, there was a ritual. When we moved throughout our schedule, there was a ritual. We did our ceremonies, which were rituals. And over the entire weekend, because of these rituals that were heavily placed in this schedule, these children felt so safe, and they poured their grief and their love not only out to us for us to hold, but then they poured into each other too. And I just remember thinking, like, when in doubt, always go to ritual. Ritual to me is the safest way to meet people where they're at. To me, ritual feels safer in sometimes than what words can do, because ritual can be done, non-verbally, in community with somebody, just holding space and being present with somebody. Ritual lends itself to that, and there's just so much depth and beauty and rawness and realness that comes from that. And so I share that because, again, doing something just as simple as what this text message suggests, perhaps co-creating a recipe that honors Graham that you get to have every so often, it matters a lot. And now you may be asking, well, if I want to start sending texts to people, what can I do to be mindful of sending a very supportive text? I'd like to share a rough model with you. And I only have a few, like I think one slide left, something like that. But this model, I feel like if you can practice sort of generally this model, you're going to end up kind of sending what I would feel like is a safe and supportive text. So just making connection, use their name, use their loved one's name if you can. Acknowledge them, acknowledge some aspect about this being tough, or that they've been on your mind, or that their loved one has been on your mind. Remind them that it's okay to accept, decline, or not make a decision right now. And then extend some kind of offering, even if they won't take you up on it. So these are two examples here, right? Like, hi, Jen, been thinking about you today. I was wondering if you'd be up for baking some of Sam's favorite cookies this week. I'll bring the supplies. If this week feels hard, I can come back in a few weeks. And then, hi, Pri, just checking in to get your thoughts on if you'd be comfortable with this. Was thinking about doing a little after dinner ritual. Would this feel supportive or hard for you? Think about it. You don't have to answer right now. So this framework, it's really gentle and easy to remember. And if you have these components in what you're sending out, it's going to come across as feeling safe and supportive for people. And so I would encourage you to, try it in some capacity. You're going to get these slides anyway. And so it's just a really helpful way to send a text if you find yourself in a position to support somebody who's grieving. And then in closing, I just want to read this last message here. Hi, Sydney. If you find yourself worrying that you might start to forget the sound of Mac's laugh or the feel of their hand in yours, know that that's a natural part of grief. try creating intentional ways to remember Max, like holding their favorite blanket, looking at photos, reminiscing on a special moment that you shared, or doing something kind in their honor. These ways of continuing your bond with Max can be helpful over time. What helps you feel most connected to Max? And so I'd love to ask you as a group, what's something that you do that helps you feel connected to the people in your life that have died?
B.
My late husband was a clinical psychologist, and he had a great sense of humor. And in the process of grief, sometimes you're actually happy. And I keep coming back to something he said one day when I was extraordinarily happy for no reason at all. He looked at me, he says, whatever you do, don't analyze it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And so there's lots of his sayings that, since he had a great sense of humor, there's a lot of great stories, and the kids and the grandkids always talk about them.
What was your husband's name?
Herbert H. Krauss.
Herbert. So we would call that a Herbertism.
Yes, yes.
Don't
yes.
analyze it. Herbertism. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's really timely advice, and for all of us to remember that we get to hold so many emotions at once in this process, and that includes positive, joyful ones and ones that can rock you and bring you to your knees. And I'm just going to leave you with an invitation for you to sign up and try text-based support yourself, free of charge. No credit card or information is going to be asked of you or anything. You'll just get a month. You can sign up and kind of see what it feels like to experience it yourself. I think that's really important, particularly if you feel like there's a level of skepticism here that you're really not comfortable still with. Try it yourself. That's really important. And then I'm going to leave you with this last text here. Writer Cheryl Strait suggests putting yourself in the way of beauty as a path towards healing. Consider spending a few minutes today near something that brings you peace, like being by the ocean, watching the sunset, admiring flowers in a garden. Sometimes being able to find beauty can unexpectedly open the door to hope. And so my last invitation for you tonight is, between now and bedtime, which may not be long for some of us, is think about what you can do, and perhaps drop it in the chat, of something that you can do to put yourself in the way of beauty between now and before you go to bed. And it can be as simple as lighting a candle, smelling something, looking at somebody that you love, stepping outside for fresh air, wrapping yourself in something cozy. What can you do to put yourself in the way of beauty between now and then?
I just want to, and I know David will give thanks, but I just want to say one of the things that we did as a team when we first met Melissa and Emma, they offered us the month free. And so between David and Jennifer and then our board members, we all kind of took, because there are so many topics, right, that are covered, just to see, like, do we want to lift this up for our community? And we all really found value in it. And I know, yes, it's raining again, people, hallelujah, our second rain day. But I also love help text as a gift for someone.
Yeah.
You know, because we often struggle, like, right, oh, flowers are gonna die, or whatever. Like, I just think it's a meaningful gift, and I'm so grateful for the work you do. And I'm gonna turn it back over to David, but I just wanted to say that yeah, we've all used it for a month because we really wanted to see, before we sort of brought Melissa to our forum, how we felt about it, what was the quality like. And as she said, we, Mary Frances O'Connor is a professor at the U of A that has spoken for us. Dr. Joanna Cacciatore is a professor at ASU that's spoken for us. So these are people that we know and admire who are giving these ideas of how to best support through text. So thanks, Melissa.
Yes.
And Ken Doka too.
Yes.
So, I was thinking about that when you were talking. Mary Frances O'Connor is such a gift to the whole community. And she talks about how, she taught us so much about how the brain works with grief, and how we have to be rewired almost, because our brain has been wired to be in relationship in the physical world with this person or this pet or whoever it is, what the loss is, for so long is that those neurons just keep firing, expecting that person to be here, even when they're not and they can't anymore because they've died. And I was just thinking, in all of these times when you kept reading these texts, it talked about the person, but helping us rewire that way of thinking. Like, it's both remembering, but bringing them into the present in a new way and teaching us how to be in relationship as we move forward and with our grief. And I just think that's why, because I'm a Luddite, folks. If you all know me, I'm a Luddite, and I was a real skeptic about this. And so I do find that it can be a powerful way on a very regular basis, in a ritual, to be in relationship with our loss.
Yeah, definitely. You bring up a good point. It's really, it's helping with integration, right? It's like this idea of like, how do we help find a new place and location for a person to exist in our life? Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. This has been eye-opening.
Yes.
And meaningful. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts that people would like to share?
You're getting a lot of love in the chat, Melissa.
You are.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Melissa, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Yes.
We deeply appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thanks. I will see you later.
Okay. Everybody else can stick around for a minute, but Melissa's free to. All right. Jennifer's going to share some more slides, I think. So we hope that you come back again next month, because we have a very special time with the Imam from the Islamic Center of Tucson. Imam Burhan Hamdan will be with us, and he will be sharing insights into Islamic death and mourning rituals. It's a pretty unique opportunity to spend time with him and hear his reflections and hear his faith and hear what teachings within Islam have to offer our own journeys as well. I have spent some time with him over the past several months, and I've learned a lot from him. So I encourage you to come back and join us next month on October 16th. And then registration will be open soon for the November one. It's not quite up yet, but it probably will be in about a week, for an interactive session called Living Rituals. We have Karen Kochar, who heads up Right at Home in-home care service, and Shundell Beck, who's a bereavement counselor here in town, will be helping to lead this session as we explore our own personal rituals, the importance of family rituals or individual rituals or community rituals that we have practiced and can practice, and offer one another ideas, especially as we enter into the time of the holidays. And so we encourage you to come for this discussion that will be led by these two folks who have much to offer us and share from their own experiences. So look for that registration page. It's going to be open very soon.
And kind of the last little details, your feedback means so much to us. So if you wouldn't mind completing our survey, it should be hitting your mailboxes very soon, if not already. So we'd love for you to give us your feedback on tonight's sessions, things you might want to see for next sessions. And then I did also put in that QR code. So if you would like more information on the services that are being offered by Intermountain, you can complete that as well. That's all in one little email. And just quickly, some different ways that you all have supported us, and we hope that you will continue to support us. We take donations through our website. We partner with a few different shopping apps, ShopRaise, Walmart, Spark Good, and Fry's VIP. So please make sure and choose us as your charity of choice. Oh, yes, Phyllis?
Well, if you order, let's say you order online from Walmart, how do you let them know? How do you do that?
So you have to go to the website, the walmart.com/sparkgood, and then you choose us as your charity of choice, and then that will link it to your account. So whenever you do go online and make purchases, then we will get a small portion of those profits.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
I love that question, Phyllis.
Yeah.
I probably won't remember. I'll probably be calling to find out again, but it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, you know where to find us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just keep us in mind when tax time rolls around, we are a qualified charitable organization for the Arizona state tax credit, and that's $1 for dollar tax credit off your Arizona state taxes. So any donations you make, those tax receipts, you are able to submit those for qualified charitable tax. Oh, yep.
Well, can I just finish that one question? So if
Sure.
you do this and you register and you buy online, it will link it. But what if you go into the store? Will that also link it?
I believe so. I'll have to double check, but I'll let you know.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah. All right. And that is it. We hope you all have a great evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I hear rain outside, so I'm super excited about that.
Really?
Yay.
Because we're not getting any rain.
Oh,
It might come your way. We're hanging on to it here in Midtown.
You guys are in Midtown?
Yeah.
Okay. 'Cause up in Oro Valley, we've hardly had 5 drops all summer.
Wow.
Well, we'll
I
try
got
to
it in
blow
the
the
foothills.
clouds.
Yeah.
Yes, send them this way, please.
right.
Please.
All right.
So good to see everybody. We look forward and hope you join us again next month. Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.
Good night, everyone. Take care.
Bye-bye.